Okay guys, I want you to go ahead and create a new file. As always, we're going to use full HD and make sure you have it set to a frame rate of 24 frames per second, and then create, and it will automatically open up this blank layer for you. I was missing my assets window, so if you go to the top where it says window and click assets, you can pull it back up if you're ever missing it. And I want you guys to pull in a static background, and it's going to be kind of this street type thing with some cars, and we are going to be making a car go across the screen, starting and stopping. Once you find that background, you pull it in onto your stage, and we are going to be working on top of that stage. Now you'll notice that it doesn't fit perfectly automatically, so you can transform it to make it fit, but there's also another easier way to do this instead of transforming it. The first thing I did was go ahead and turn it into a symbol, which you don't actually have to do for your background. Anything you want to animate, you turn into a symbol, but I didn't really need to do that. I was just being crazy. So if you click onto the white of the background, or the true background, the actual stage, well, you'll be able to click the dock tab there at the top right and click match contents, and that will fill your background image, or at least make it fit with the sizing. Some of the backgrounds are different sizes, so they don't all fit perfectly, but that'll get it pretty darn close, and in this case it'll get it perfect. Then you want to label your layers. Remember, that's really important when you're animating, to label your layers. Sorry. And go ahead and add a new layer. I was looking to see if there were any props that were pre-made for what I wanted to do, and there were not, so we are going to make our own prop or symbol in this case. So the first thing to do is to go over to your tools on the left, and we're going to start with a rectangle. It's not really super important that you're starting with a rectangle per se, but that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to choose a blue car, and I'm not going to add a stroke. Stroke would be an outline. So if you wanted to have maybe a black outline or a different colored outline, you could add a stroke, but none of the other cars in this background do. So I'm just going to do a blue rectangle. Now this next feature is super handy. If you click on that transform tool, you can actually click and drag the edges of this rectangle, as well as make points or drag the points. So if I want to make a point, you're going to hold down Alt on a PC or Option on a Mac, and you can create an additional point on whatever shape you've pulled in. That's why it doesn't necessarily matter to pull in a rectangle, but you typically start with a shape that's somewhat close to what you're trying to end up with, and so that's why I went with the rectangle for a car. And I'm just going to play around with this until I make what looks like a car. So I want you guys to do the same. I'm going to show you some more tips on changing some different colors and making selections on this shape. Alright, once you've got the shape how you want it, we're going to add some different colors by double clicking on the shape. See how it kind of selects it? And then you're going to click and drag. I'm going to do this for the windshield. Click and drag, and you can see it kind of makes that one portion of it a different color if I select a different color in the fill. So I'm going to kind of go with purplish blue, and then you can also click and drag these points and these lines to curve them, which is super handy. I'm actually going to use this same technique to add a window to the back and headlights and tail lights and a little black rim across the bottom. So I want you to play with this, make your car, it can look like mine, it can look unique. Mine's certainly not the fanciest or best car in the world, but it kind of gets the point across. So go ahead and play with this until you're pretty familiar with how to use this tool. For this next step, we're going to use the oval tool to make our front and back wheels. If you hold down shift whenever you're creating this shape, you'll get a perfect circle. And what I did was I used a thick stroke to make it look like the tire rim, kind of going based off of the tire on that red car or pinkish red car in the background. But something I didn't do initially that I wish I had done that you should do is make each of your tires on a new layer. Okay, not on the same layer as the car and not on the same layer as each other. Make a layer that is your front tire and a layer that is your back tire. That being said, you can also duplicate shapes and duplicate layers. So if you want to make one first and then duplicate that layer, you can. What I really want you to do though is create a sort of cross shape through the middle of the tire so that you can tell later on when it's spinning. Do this again by double clicking on your shape on the circle and making a selection and filling it with that darker color. By now you should have 4 layers: your background layer that's locked, your car layer, and your 2 tire layers. If you ever have any keyframes or frames at all that you want to delete, highlight them, right click on them, and there are options to either clear the keyframes or delete them. I do recommend that you lock your background layer and any other layers that you're not using at the moment. It does make things simpler. However, I am going to be working with the car and the tire layers here in a second. So I want my background layer to extend all the way to 5 seconds. So I'm going to go to 5 seconds and add that keyframe. I also want my car to extend to 5 seconds. However, I want it to stop. I don't want it to keep moving all the way at 5 seconds. So I'm going to put my next keyframe over at 3 seconds, I believe, is what I did. Yes. And then at that 3 seconds, I am going to move the car over. If you hold down shift, it should stay in the same line. So you can see there we go from left to right. We'll add the tweening later. But I want to go over to that 5 second mark and add another keyframe just so my car doesn't disappear throughout the process. Remember to add a tweening. You only need to click on any frame in between the first and last frame and click add tween, or classic tween, I believe it says. If you ever want to view kind of the frames that are before and after what you're working with, which comes in great for illustrating animation, you can add an onion skin, but we'll get more into that later. Now we're actually going to do something new called parenting. So you see on top of the layers where there's a little lock sign and the eyeball, around there, right above there is the parenting view. And we're going to click and drag both tires so that they connect to our car. Okay, we want the car to be the parent. So we're taking the kids and connecting them to the car. That means we're telling Animate that we want those 2 layers to basically be linked in a hierarchy to the car, and they're going to follow the car. The reason you don't yet see them following the car is because we didn't have any keyframes. So we're going to go to that 3 second mark and add a keyframe for our tires, and you should see that the wheels follow our car. We also want to go ahead and add keyframes at the end of the 5 seconds so our wheels don't disappear. So if you play it, you can see it goes across with our car. However, it does not quite look natural yet. Our tires are not spinning. They are just kind of floating along with the car. So on each of the wheels, we are going to create a 360-degree rotation or transformation. So you'll see I went to the window at the top of the screen, and make sure you click rotate and 360. Another key point here is you want to be on that keyframe that is at 3 seconds. You don't want to be on the starting keyframe. So when you do this, make sure you're on the keyframe at 3 seconds. Then you're going to tween it and do the same for the other tire or other wheel. Then next, you'll notice it's not doing anything yet if you play it. We need to go over to the right side where it said frame under properties on that frame tab, and we need to change the tweening to a clockwise rotation. So we're going to go under rotate and change it to clockwise. Once you do that, you should notice that your tires actually turn as your car goes from left to right, or right to left if that is the way you did it. However, if your car goes right to left, your tires should turn counterclockwise. There are 12 principles of animation that we're going to go over throughout the year. One of them is called slow in and slow out. This is the concept that a lot of motion has a sort of easing in or easing out like our car really should have. The only thing that moves at a consistent rate would be like a robot. So humans or organic things, not that a car is organic, typically are going to have more action or more frames towards the beginning and end of a motion, slowing it down. Whenever you're working in Animate and you're not doing illustrating, there are certain curves that we can work with that will slow down the intro and the outro, I guess I'll call it, of a motion. There are going to be some objects that only slow down when they're going into a motion, or only slow down when they're going out of a motion. For instance, we're not going to slow down the bullet, but we might slow down the kickback of the gun. This little dinosaur, as he's getting up, if you slow down in the beginning and the end of the motion. So like for instance, the stick figure really hops up fast. There's not any frames in between that first motion and that jump right there. So by adding more frames, even just that one more frame, it slowed it down quite a bit. Take a look at these two actions as this little guy jumps. There are going to be more frames on those points entering and exiting the motion. So now that you know the concept, let's apply it to our car. And it's actually pretty simple. Whenever you're not doing illustration and you just have a symbol, you're going to click on that tweening and go to the little section of tweening where it says Classic Ease. This is under Properties, under Frame, and we're going to do an ease in and an ease out. Now you'll see here it says quad, cubic, quart, a bunch of other options. To be completely honest, I don't really know the difference between all of them, but we are going to need both an ease in and an ease out for a car. So go back to that section, and where it says ease in out, that's the one we're going to choose. And you can see the curve, how it is different on, or it's curved on the bottom left and top right. So that's how you know that it's easing in and easing out. I do believe there's a custom setting on there too if you want to play with that. We need to do this not only for the car, but for each of the tires as well, because that rotation should start slower and then slow down once we get to the end. Once you do that, you should be able to see the difference. The car should look a bit more natural there. You can also play the little test movie at the top right, the play button, the very top right of The Animate screen is that play button. You can test it there. And then when you are done, you can export it as either a GIF or an MP4. Until next time, bye.